own a car and park on the streets in their neighborhood will tell you what a nightmare it is to find parking. To make their point, car owners will typically point to reasons such as there are too many alternate side days now, there are too many bike lanes, too many outdoor dining sheds, and then probably they'd say too many cars from other people. Some of these complaints are new. Some of them are timeless. There was an old episode of The Odd Couple where Oscar won a car in a contest, and it was so problematic to have a car to park in the city that he decided that he didn't even want the free car. Streets blog editor Gersh Kuntzman had his team dig through some of the city's newspaper archives to find the more things change, the more they stay the same. Gersh, good morning.
Great to be here.
So I want to get straight to these articles because this is in the paper's gold. From 1917, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. In 1917, parking a personal car on the street was a crime.
Mm-hmm. Should still be, by the way, but it's not, obviously. Yeah, it wasn't until the 1950s that you could park a car overnight in the public right-of-way, the curb.
They had an exception for doctors on house calls in 1917, and people abused that.
Well, yeah, maybe we should bring back house calls first, and then we can decide if... When was the last house call? Jeez.
Let's go to 1923. New York Times published an article about coal truck drivers complaining that they couldn't make their deliveries. They urged passenger car drivers to use off-street parking lots. They complained the general public has been unwilling to use those lots because then car owners would have to walk 3 or 4 blocks.
It sounds like a very common complaint as well, that we have a lot of deliveries in residential areas, Amazon and other online retailers, so that those truckmen, we used to call them truckmen, are complaining about all the cars in their way. Against the curbside lane, for example, we need loading zones. That's what they needed back then. That's what we need now.
Right. You may have guessed 1923. It didn't end there. 1945, a New York Times headline, car parking poses post-war problem. As more soldiers returned from the war, the city had even fewer off-street parking spaces.
Well, that's a classic thing. People... the post-war boom, it was a baby boom. Mm-hmm. People bought cars. Well, the same thing happened during the pandemic. I mean, it's like a constant cyclical thing, and it's frustrating for us who see it, from the historical perspective.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not just the newspapers.
No.
We always enjoy a chance to play a Seinfeld clip. 1992, George finds the perfect parking spot.
Look at this guy. Are you crazy? What are you doing? Hey! You're stealing my space!
George, wait, you don't know who this guy is? People kill for a parking space in this city.
No. He's not getting away with this.
George!
Hey, what are you doing? I think I'm parking my car. You can't do that. You can't just sneak in from the back like that. I'm not sneaking. I didn't even know you were parking. You were just sitting there 3 spaces out. Well, if you didn't think I was parking, why did you put it in head first? Well, that's the way I park.
I think it was the entire episode, wasn't it?
The entire episode, and this was 30-something years ago.
Totally holds up, by the way, that show.
Yeah.
I mean, because people do have those arguments. Still, I mean, we see, you have in the papers violent crime committed over a parking space in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to go to a 1999 New York Times article. The headline on this was, "The Space Race, Why Is It So Hard to Find a Parking Space in Manhattan?" And the major conclusion of this article, as you read through it, is essentially that there's not enough room for all the cars.
Right. I mean, it's basic Euclidean geometry, or maybe it's Platonic geometry. I'm not a math guy, but there's not enough room. In other words, the cars are getting bigger. People are bringing more of them into the city. New Yorkers are buying more cars, and they think that there's magically going to be more room for parking. Now, in fairness, we've lost about 10,000 parking spaces to outdoor dining sheds, but there's 13 Central Parks worth of free parking in New York, and the amount of space taken by the dining sheds is like a tiny, tiny, tiny corner of the park.
So what was the point of the exercise in digging through all of this? In the end, you're not telling us something that we don't already know.
Well, it does bear repeating, though, Pat, because, I was at a community board last night. I know you guys were celebrating Valentine's Day, but I was at a community board meeting. And again, thank you. Again, the issue is very romantic. Again, the issue comes up every time someone wants to make an improvement in the public right-of-way, whether it's outdoor dining, which is good for the community, a bike lane, which is good for a broad number of people. It always comes down to some car owner saying, well, what about my parking? And of course, the curbside lane in New York City is not your parking, it's everybody's public space, some for parking, some for delivery, some for bike lanes, some for outdoor dining, etc. So it comes up all the time.
Is there any reason to believe that anything will change?
Oh, I'm going to jump in and tell you what. It's if we are successful at improving public transit, subways and buses, and that means some priority bus lanes that the buses don't get snarled in all of the car traffic. I think if you are successful at that, you take away the incentive for people to own cars.
Yeah,
not everybody. I mean, some people are going to own their car anyway.
Right, and I mean, a big part of it is people say, well, I need my car to get around. And in some circumstances, say you live in eastern Queens and you have to go to Long Island, transit doesn't exist that's going to get you to your job necessarily. But most of people who own cars can get around in transit. But if the transit was better, like you said, all those buses are being blocked by the cars that people are in. If buses got you from Long Island City to Midtown Manhattan in 15 minutes, nobody would do that drive.
Right, it would be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Gersh, thank you for coming in.
Great to be here.